Hey everyone, welcome back to The Good Doctor's continuing coverage of Netflix's limited series masterpiece, Unbelievable. I'm Dr. Kristen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Erin.
And today we are talking about episode 5, in which, as my husband would say, the plot is thickening so hard you can't move the spoon. So
it did thicken quite a bit in this episode. Yeah, we're getting towards the end, so we've got to make some moves.
So in Marie, just really quick, because Marie's stuff is so depressing, and also kind of quick.
It just explodes.
So we learn more about essentially, the mother, one of the foster moms calls the other police department. You think like, oh my God, maybe that police department will talk to the Linwood one and they'll whatever. And the Linwood detective was like, no, it was a lie.
Yeah, well, I can tell you about that case because she lied.
And there's a look on the other detective's face where like clearly the other detective doesn't believe them. And that made me feel a little bit of like spark for humanity. Like,
yeah. And
okay.
Then the Linwood detective was like, well, we feel so strongly about it that we're charging her with false reporting. And I think from what we've learned watching the show that like that happens so infrequently that was like the one argument he could make to probably convince the other detective that like, whoa, okay, well they must, because we never charge anyone with false reporting. So if they did, she must be lying. And I was like, oh, every time I see him, I think how many women got raped because you behaved this way and you had these perceptions. And I mean, they do a very good job in this show not to make him out to be the horrible bad guy and to be an infallible human, which he is. But like, that's my thought every time he says she lied, every time he says that case is closed.
Yeah.
I'm like,
So we see also Marie starting to lose it at work. That one of the fallouts from getting revealed is that now she's at the loading dock. The loading dock supervisor is unpleasant.
A creep with a capital C,
yeah.
man.
He thinks it's really funny to try to corner her and he's also probably at least 10 inches taller than she is and some stuff like that. So Marie's life continues to devolve. So as we move on to we'll just put a pin in that.
Just park it. Heartbroken. It's awful.
Heartbroken. So now we move on to 2011 and we join our intrepid lady detectives
in the great state of Colorado.
There's a couple things that happen in this episode. One is that because the FBI has been brought in, they have clearly more availability to more cases. Mm-hmm. There appears to be a lead in Kansas. And bless Karen Duvall did not know the nose trick. So she's got to do Erin's favorite drive from Denver to Kansas.
So many times in my life. So I grew up south of Denver in a town called Colorado Springs, and I had family in Kansas City for my whole childhood. And so we often went to visit them in Kansas City. And it is a 10-hour drive across the state of Kansas where there is nothing until you get vaguely close to where Karen ended up, Topeka, and there's a church that you can see from the side of the road, the Cathedral of the Plains. I know it because I've been there. And that's pretty much all that you see. So I felt a deep, deep sense of camaraderie with our Karen and the number of times I have had to blast tunes so as not to be completely falling asleep driving through Kansas.
I joke that there's one turn on that highway. So in the state outside of Kansas City, once you're outside of Kansas City, Kansas, that bit of it, that tiny bit, because most of it's in Missouri, then there's one turn. Anyway, so Karen goes, she draws the short straw, the nose tap short straw, and heads out to Lawrence, Kansas.
Yep.
And gets all their files.
That's actually how it go KU. Sorry, contractually obligated. Continue.
Goes to Lawrence, Kansas, and starts looking through their files, and we find out a couple things that's very important. Yeah. One is that the same kind of pattern that could have very easily happened in the various Colorado cases where you get a little bit somewhere and then everything just dries up and it dies, happened over and over and over again in Kansas. Also, the discovery of a textbook called like Forensic Rape something or another. But the detective says, I found it on the dark web, that this is a how-to book for how rapists can get away with it.
So the forensic book is for detectives on how to investigate rape.
But they're trading it on the dark web.
But it also works as a way to show people how not to get investigated for rape.
So for anyone who hears the dark web and like you've heard about it kind of in like, I don't even know what that means. Now we more frequently call it 4chan. And it is the dark web in kind of the early aughts is what evolved into kind of a very organized, small space that has incredible amounts of power. If you've heard of Gamergate, this is where this came from. Some of the Pizzagate stuff came from this place. And it's a network of people who believe they are above society in terms of morality and or the law and or anything else. And very frequently in the dark web, it's driven by misogyny, a deep hatred of women, and a desire to humiliate women. So rape or rape threats, actually carrying out a rape, joking about rape. Rape is like their favorite thing.
It's their go-to threat.
So I was publishing things in another job, and they didn't like what I was publishing, and so they frequently threatened either to sexually assault me or to bribe my husband to do it, which my husband was like, sure. Why are we having this conversation? But that's their go-to thing. So if this is the textbook that they used, and are probably still using updated versions of, it also kind of quietly blows a hole in Karen and Grace's insistence that because this guy's sites are so clean, he has to be a police officer.
Right.
And that's an important step to the scene that comes later in a blow up that we'll cover in a minute. But we're going to first talk about Dr. Hinson's other favorite scene.
Yes. So, where they're working with some forensic evidence that they have at a scene. We forgot to talk about Annalee Ashford.
Oh my gosh.
Starts the episode. We're so excited. So if you saw our previous recap, we called her Broken Pelvis Girl.
Because she looked familiar, but we couldn't place her.
And then offline, we looked her up on IMDb.
Broadway owns Annalee Ashford.
Annalee Ashford. Sunday in the Park with George. Annalee Ashford. I was like, I knew her face. So we meet her at the beginning of the episode. She is the woman who survived the attack by this serial rapist. She is real
incandescently livid.
Totally understandable. Yep. And for me, it was starting to put the pieces together of what the spectrum of investigating sexual assault looks like.
Yeah.
So you have the Linwood detectives with Marie, who completely botch everything, and are totally driven by stereotypes and biases. You have the detectives in and around Denver. I think it might even be Aurora, but it would probably be a different suburb because he was hitting different places. But anyway, you have Annalee Ashford's
and when we meet him,
narrator.
Like, he's so clear. He's regretful that he didn't follow things up. He thought he was doing his best, but he doesn't really know now.
Yeah, he recognizes that he missed a couple of pieces and that he didn't really have the support. And like, it's really hard on a case like this when you don't have any any forensic evidence, and you know, like, you feel a lot more sympathetic for him than you do for the Linwood detectives, but then you're still balancing him against
Grace and
detectives Duvall and Rasmussen as like the pinnacle of how you should behave. So for me, I was just absolutely fascinated about this, but I digress. To the great state of Kansas still, or Missouri. She's in Lawrence, so she's in
Lawrence, yeah.
And so Karen has gotten this book from the detective in Lawrence and is sitting in a diner, as you do, reading about rape forensics.
Which honestly, both of us have done versions of
like,
that.
Well, so I've been that person.
Didn't see that as weird.
No. So she's doing that while she's having dinner, and she notices this man down the end of the diner bar, and he is kind of making eyes at her, and, you know,
she is having none of it,
giving her the look. And for me, the first time I watched this episode, I didn't really pay attention to it. But the second time I caught it, and my thought was, like, I feel like we've all been that person. Like, we've all been that woman that has sat there and been made a little bit uncomfortable, that has gotten unwanted attention, or clearly to me, he felt like he was, you know, owed a conversation. And we've all been there. And I was like, she is literally sitting there, and he doesn't know what she's reading, but like, she is literally sitting there reading a book about like how to get away with rape. And part of the broader problem of sexual assault and rape culture in the United States are these gender dynamics and these power dynamics that play out in situations in public where women are often objectified. And so for me, I was just like, it was something really small that the show did. And then, of course, our Karen just absolutely shows him up, like, clearly in a move she has done many times in her career, like shows him her badge and her gun. And flips the table and makes him a little bit uncomfortable with the staring and makes him the object of her attention. in a way that was a flip on the power dynamic that was really powerful. Because then also in this episode, a little bit before Karen goes to Kansas, our Grace has a little bit of a blow up in the old FBI office.
So one of the things that we both felt about this episode was that it felt very resonant to us. So I travel a lot for business and sit in a lot of places alone. I've learned to never sit at the bar by myself. I always get a booth. I always make sure that that I have a waitress or a waiter or a bartender or someone who knows that I'm there and I'm there by myself, a staff member. And I never, ever talk on the phone or listen to headphones while I'm alone in a bar, like things like that. And so I also share Grace's explosion at this. They're talking in the FBI's a meeting, and they're having a conversation about like how it has to be a cop or whatever. And the FBI guy, Thacker, I believe his name is very calmly poking holes in that theory.
Rationally,
not out of any sort of malice, but out of like, hey, we've got to actually follow the right trails.
Yeah, so he's like, yes, I mean, yeah, cops would know this, but so would anybody who watches CSI.
CSI has absolutely ruined our ability to get forensic evidence off the crime scene, like all this kind of stuff.
Totally rational.
So she loses it.
Yeah.
Throws a temper tantrum, which like justifiably so.
Yep.
Storms out to her desk, and Karen follows her.
And they have like one of the best conversations I've seen on television about this. And the rage that Grace has of all these statistics of how unequal the treatment is of men and women, and the fact that she's found 30% of Florida police officers have sexually assaulted,
domestic violence against their partners. They've admitted it, and they've
admitted it themselves. So
and they still have their badge.
So they came in and said, "Yep, I beat my wife," and all 30% of those men still have the badge and the gun. And she was like, "What would happen if 30% of women detectives reported that? They'd all be gone." And she's just working herself up, and Karen is the devil's advocate, calmly like, I don't think the FBI guy, I can't remember his name.
I don't think it's Thacker's fault.
I don't think it's his fault. I don't think that's what he was trying to say. Like, I think he was, and she just looks at her, and like she's on the verge.
Yeah, like Grace is looking up at Karen,
and she says, "Where's his outrage? Where is there?" And like for me, I just like paused the video. I was like, I'm gonna need to take a minute. How many times have I felt that? Like, where is my outrage being matched? At this kind of treatment against the violence that women face in society in this country. And yeah, I've like, for my money, one of the best lines of this whole season was just, where is his outrage?
And then Karen very calmly responds in a, not only somebody who is very clearly trained in trauma conversations, somebody de-escalating, but someone who's a mom. Like you can really tell that this is how she's had these conversations.
Karen.
And just very well practiced, but kind of said like, right, you are completely correct. The problem is if you sit out here throwing the temper tantrum out here, no one's outrage will ever match yours because it won't be productive. Like you have the position, you have the badge and the gun to turn your outrage into productivity and get this guy.
Yeah.
What's your choice? And fundamentally, actually, we've been having this conversation offline about outrage over other things and other matters and what do we do with it. And we both play that role for each other in different ways. Like one of us is outraged, the other one's like, right, but what are we going to do about it? Like,
and
you need that counterbalance because there are times it just spills over and you can't function.
Yes, and if anybody wants to read a book about it or see a book review that I did for Abby Research, Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage is exactly that. What do we do with the eloquent rage? And her thesis is that we have to be constructive with it. We have to build something with it. And that's where Karen brings Grace at the end, brings her back, allows her rage because we need it.
Doesn't minimize it.
Doesn't devalue it. Doesn't say like, oh, just stop complaining, or
or you're being dramatic.
Suck it up, stop being dramatic. Like, lets her, yes.
You are correct.
You are outraged, but like have to be.
He is not outraged as much as you are. You are correct.
You have to be outraged in the room.
Yep.
Because that's where we're going to make a difference. And that is where the episode ends.
And so if you have been watching this and you are outraged and you have nothing productive to do, if you've never heard of End the Backlog, it's a charity that is raising money to, there's a huge, massive, I mean like hundreds of thousands of rape cases and rape kits in the United States that have never been tested. This is due to lack of funds. This is due to lack of technology, whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the quickest
resources, people, manpower.
But one of the quickest ways to get sexual assailants off the street is to test these rape kits.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to throw a link in the show notes to End the Backlog. And if you're looking for a productive way to channel your rage at this show, a few dollars to End the Backlog is a great way to do it.
Yep. That is all we have for episode 5. We'll be back for episode 6, where presumably we're going to get even closer to catching this guy in Colorado. Fingers crossed. See you then.
Bye.